Let's start with you, Mick Neville. On the face of it, equality should be equality. Why should men and women be treated any differently?
Yeah, I tend to agree. When I was in the police, it was not unusual to see people with 100 previous convictions. And it's a case of, at what point do you say enough is enough? When do you say, should you go to, you should go to jail because you've been given this order, and you failed to comply? And also pragmatism comes to play in all this. When I was a DS or a DI, you raid a drugs house, you raid somewhere that's handling stolen goods, the man and woman are both involved. There's 2 kids there. Do you nick the woman? No, because social services won't come out. The bloke, and even the most hardened villain, will take the rap. And so the woman gets away with it, basically, but the bloke takes the rap. So pragmatism comes into play. And I just think, if we're going to have equal rights in everything, then you can't keep making these differentiations, because where's it stop?
Right, Sian Berry, I mean, equality is equality, unless apparently it means going to prison, in which case you want to be given different treatment, better treatment to men.
So the differences between men and women in terms of offending behaviour are actually incredibly stark. Only about 8% of women commit any kind of violent offence. Most women are being sentenced for things like persistent shoplifting, evading TV licences, fraud, often drugs offences to support someone else's habit as well. And these are not sentences, these are not crimes that make them a danger to society.
Well, they are crimes.
And sending people to prison,
But men go to prison for the same thing.
But especially sending women to prison, the impact of doing that, particularly for short sentences, can do far more harm.
Why is the impact on women any worse than the impact on men?
Women often have caring responsibilities, so in the process of doing that, those children are maybe going into care, that woman's maybe losing her home. The ripple effects into society are far more serious. Now, this is an evidence-based view, and it's a cross-party view.
OK,
it's not just me saying that.
Just to establish, we're talking about less than 5% of the total prison population is women. To me, and to many people, one of the most important things will be, if you imprison someone for less than 12 months, does it stop them reoffending? Because if it stops them, there's an argument, very strong argument for it. If actually it doesn't stop them, and they just keep bouncing in and out of prison.
Well, it certainly stops them when they're in there. That's the problem, you see. If you give somebody a short sentence... I agree, TV licences, shoplifting, all these alternatives should be tried first. But if somebody continually breaches them and doesn't comply, doesn't pay the fine, doesn't do the community service order, there's got to be a backstop.
But, Sian, I think we need different sentences. If somebody's persistently reoffending, the causes of that need to be examined and they need to be sentenced to getting some help.
But
We're not talking about
if you're convicting a woman and sending her to prison, is that more effective than if you convict her and send her to, I don't know, a women's centre or give her a community
all the evidence
order?
shows that criminal sentences and sending people to prison does more harm than good. In fact, in a huge way.
OK.
It's much, much cheaper to sentence people to get help.
All right, let's go to Brenda.
2 weeks worth of prison time.
Brenda, you went to prison you spent 11 months in prison, 5 months under supervision. This is for a GBH offence. You got into a fight defending your sister. This was back in 2008 when you were 21.
Yes.
So you're a young woman, you got into a fight defending your sister, and you end up in prison, which is presumably a pretty catastrophic moment in your life.
Yeah.
What do you feel about this debate? Because obviously, as we move more and more, quite rightly, in my opinion, to full gender equality in all things, there will be some men watching this going, well, why should it be one rule for women and one rule for men if they do the same offence?
I mean, I got sent to prison. I had no previous convictions. I was not known to the justice system in any shape or form. I actually was studying to be a childminder and had been inspected. My house had been inspected. So I had my plan, I guess, my life kind of figured out at that point. And that situation happening, it wasn't a plan that I had. I didn't go out on my way to...
But a lot of men find themselves in that position too, where they get into a fight, it's a moment of madness, and they end up going to prison as well. My point is not that you deserved or didn't deserve that sentence. It's whether a woman and a man should be treated differently for the same offence.
And I still believe that women, again, like Sian said, but there's more to a woman going to prison. Like, a man could go to prison and the woman will be the one that brings the children to visit the man. Whereas if the woman is in prison, like Sian said, children do end up in a justice system, like in social service, which leads to more kids being in a system where they're actually more likely to commit crimes.
That's
Did
predicated.
you have children?
I don't have children, no.
Right, but this is predicated on the belief that, women are the primary carers, right?
Yeah.
But we are moving, driven by the feminist movement, to an age when, and nothing wrong with this, where men are deemed to be just as important in bringing up children as women.
The same
Can you have both running at the same time? Can you say, well, women are the primary carers, therefore they get lesser sentences, but actually when it comes to childcare, we want men to do exactly the same as women?
The same considerations should apply where men are the primary carers. It's just far less common. And having, like the all-party parliamentary group recommends, like the London Assembly committee that I'm on has recommended, it does make sense to have a blanket policy and build up those alternative services for women, the women's centres that they need, which are just not there at the moment.
I think the trouble is,
those alternatives,
Mick, the trouble is, to lots of people, it sounds soft, doesn't it?
does.
If you commit the crime, you do the time. But if it's not effective, then isn't it something that we should consider an alternative to?
I agree, but some people see these, like, you know, you've got to do 100 hours paid work, and most people know these schemes are a complete joke.
Well, then let's toughen up the schemes and make sure that people get something out of it.
And rehabilitate people. When people in prison, we say they're not rehabilitated, well, then rehabilitate them. But at some point, prison has got to be the solution at the end of the line.
It's really hard to rehabilitate people on a short prison sentence. That's the
Right, did it rehabilitate you? I mean, have you offended since in any way?
I was arrested after trying to apply for a job that I had been working so hard to get, and in my depression, I was arrested for, I guess, being in a situation where I was just angry. I wasn't violent to anyone or anybody. I was just in.
But did you feel that prison had a beneficial or negative effect on you?
I think a negative effect, because I came out to, you know, having to rebuild my life again, having to show society that I am capable of actually being in an employment and actually do well in that.
That was the consequence. I don't know all the circumstances of your story, but that was the consequence of you committing grievous bodily harm on somebody and being convicted for it and getting a pretty tough prison sentence.
A pretty tough prison sentence, even to the point that I was actually... I have a British passport and I was meant to be deported back to Uganda.
What did you actually do to your victim?
I beat them up.
Badly?
Badly. I owned up to it. I didn't once deny the fact that I hit them. You know, now looking back, you know, I've spoken to solicitors that actually said, well, did your solicitor even pull up the fact that self-defence of another, you know, self-defence of a family member? That was never brought up in my circumstances.
When you were in prison, what were the other women like? And did you feel like it was full of people who actually, you know, shouldn't be there? Or actually, did you think, goodness me, this is...
To be honest, I met a lot of women that I
place.
believe shouldn't have been there, but then I also saw women being released and then returning in less than a couple of days, which for me was like, why are you returning? And I didn't understand, because obviously I hadn't been outside prison to face what they are facing. And like we're saying, there are loads of circumstances in regards to women getting released and have no home, you know, have no job. They, you know, if, of course, in prison you get help, support, that's not there when you come out.
I certainly think the interesting thing about this debate is, I think if you, in regards to the welfare of children, right, as long as women, as they clearly still remain, are the primary carers of women, right, which is the vast majority, actually,
kids,
in this country, of their children, you know, I can see an argument, actually, for there being a slight difference in treatment of relatively, let's say relatively, the more minor scale of offending. Because if the children then get taken into care...
And are more likely to offend as a result.
And they themselves become a financial burden on the system, at what point do you do the maths and go, it's better for the kids to be with their mum and better for the system to not be spending all this money?
Yeah, I mean, the maths has been done. About 10 years ago, there was an independent review of this and recommendations made. And we've waited until this year for the government to put its strategy together and finally put some funding in. It needs more funding, but it looks like we might be starting to turn the corner.
Well, I'm in an opposition where I started off thinking one thing and I've sort of moved the other way.
2/3 of women put into prison are mothers, and more than 17,000 children separated from them.
But it must be said that you've got to do quite serious stuff to get put in prison these days. There's very few people just
More than half of women sent to prison are sent there for theft.
But how many times have they committed theft? Not one of those people will be a 10-bob shoplifting the first time round. They will have committed repeat and repeat offences.
But why, and what can we do to solve the problem?
Well, that's a different question. But that doesn't negate what Mick's saying, which is actually, you know, theft. If you go and rob people repeatedly, right? I've been burgled a few times. It is incredibly invasive, very unpleasant, right? And I don't think you should be spared punishment for that, right?
There's got to be a line in the sand, and what we're saying here is that the villains, the criminals will know, oh, I'll never go to prison because I've got kids, so I can just offend, and that's not correct.
I think that's a very valid point.